this video, we're going to show you how to set up a digital press. We'll go to Admin, Print, Press Standards. Now if we wanted to add a new press, we could come into the quick links and click Add Press Standard, or we can edit one of our existing presses. So for today's example, we're going to go ahead and take a look at our Canon image press. Now this is a digital sheet machine, so we've selected digital and sheet, put in our name. We could add a minimum cost, so from the print calculator, if our press cost came underneath this minimum, we would automatically bump up that cost for the job. We can also select a default run type of one-sided or two-sided. We can define an hourly rate. So we'd like to say that the hourly rate should be fully burdened. So not just what the cost is for, say, the payment on the machine and the person standing in front of it, but maybe even what it costs to keep the lights on, insurance, any maintenance, things like that. Base run rate per hour, so impressions per hour. So this is going to be how many sides per hour this machine will print. Spoilage percent, so we can define a default spoilage percent. Max run sheet width and length. Sheet margin, so if you want to define that unprintable area around the edge of your sheet, this will help us with imposition later on. You can define that here. You can also define the size of registration marks if you want to default that. This is a less common option on digital presses. And then we can also define consumables or setup costs. So we can define that on a job basis or a per piece basis. So if you wanted to, say, put a $10 setup charge on this press, you could. You could also define setup time and any setup sheets you wanted to predefine here as well. The next section we have is our click rate section. So in this section, we can define the name of our click rate, the area of our click, and what that actual rate is. You can have as many click rates as you want. So if you're in machines that have, say, regular click charges, oversized click charges, color versus black. I know machines like iGens have maybe 5 or 6 different click tiers. So you can customize this based on your machine. And then you can also define whether you want your clicks to be based on impression, which is more typical, or if you had a roll machine selected, you could define linear feet and actually calculate clicks based on linear foot. This ink setup section is for anybody that is using a digital inkjet machine. So say something like a Canon i300 or KM1. You could actually come in here and calculate what your ink costs are going to be, as well as clicks if you have clicks. So we have 3 different ways of calculating ink. We have by area, so you can define what your cost per square inch would be. I would say this is the most common way people are going to calculate ink cost. So you can create multiple tiers of square inch prices for, say, text only, full coverage, fine art, and so on and so forth. You have by the piece, so you can actually define what your ink costs would be by the size of the piece. And then you can also define ink by volume and actually define based on what the coverage is, what your cost per milliliter and how many milliliters per square inch this particular ink would cover. In addition to that, we also have a run rate factor table here. While less common in digital, it is still available there for you to use. And this would work by entering a quantity where you wanted that run rate to change and actually putting in that run rate per hour number here and clicking the little save icon. One thing that I want to come back to is this click setup checkbox. So if you are setting up an inkjet machine and you do have an ink selection defined, you could uncheck clicks if this machine was only an ink machine and had no click charges associated with it. So this tends to be based on the contract you have with the manufacturer and what kind of machine it is. But just to let you know that the press setup here will accommodate clicks only, clicks and inks, or inks only. So when we select roll as our digital press, we can select our run type like normal. Hourly rate, spoilage, run rate factor are all the same. Max roll width is a selection that's just for roll presses. Max image area. So what's the typical size of an impression that you're going to do on your runs? Your left and right margin for that roll. The setup options are the same as on a sheet press. One of the main differences here is that we now have a run quality setup that we can select here. So typically you'll have a name, resolution, feet per minute. So different selections will run faster or slower. So different resolutions will run faster or slower. So based on your machine, you can set those options up in here, name them appropriately, and then you could also select one as a default so that it automatically is selected when you select that press. The ink options and click options are the same as they are in the sheet press. So you can see the click options here, and then we could also select a ink option as well if we wanted to. And then one last thing in this screen is to talk about the update all templates button. So if you used this press in any number of templates and needed to update the specs of this press, you could come in here, update that press, click update all templates, and that would update the changes that you made on this press to all your print templates that you have set up.